a lot of people were excited to hear from you, and I've got Glenn Grant on here as well as Dave Sims, both former retired colonels. But John, tell us about your background and what you do in urban warfare specifically, and why you are absolutely blowing up on Twitter. And your manual's been translated and distributed among the Ukrainian territorial defense and army. Just tell us a little bit about your background, what you do, because it's a pleasure to have you on.
Hey, thanks. It's an honor to be on, and I mean that. So John Spencer, I spent 25 years in the Army as an infantry soldier, both enlisted and officer. I finished out my career teaching at West Point for 4 years, tactics, strategy, helped stand up the Modern War Institute. And then when I retired, I continued working for them, and I still work for them with all disclaimers that nothing I say it represents West
Point. That makes
Point.
any sense. Yeah.
Right. I started doing urban warfare. I mean, to be honest, I did 2 combat deployments to Iraq, both of them in the invasion in 2003 and 2008 for the fight for Sadr City. Really were urban. But I started academically in 2014 with General Odinero in the Chief of Staff of the Army Strategic Studies Group. Honored to be a year-long research group looking at megacities, and was the Army ready for that? That really started my intellectual journey into studying urban warfare. When I helped stand up Modern War Institute, that was what I was doing. And then since for the last 4 or 5 years, I have a dream job, and I get to travel the world, study urban battles, write about urban battles. So on February 28th, when Russia invaded Ukraine, and then the Ukrainian people were asked to help resist, to help the Ukrainian military, which I immediately knew what the objective of Russia was. We all saw it happening. We saw an invasion. We saw an Iraq invasion style operation with the opening shock and awe, rapid movement of troops attempting to get
run.
The capital city. Yeah. Of course, they failed to do that, but there are radio messages going out in Ukraine saying, go out and resist. And that was really much the message they got. So I started tweeting from just an old guy who studied urban warfare, had my own experiences. Look, this is what I would do. I wouldn't just tell people to go resist. I would use the urban terrain because the urban defense is very powerful. Those tweets went viral. Then people, the way the Twitter works, the tweets would go away. So somebody asked me to take all my tweets and put them into a manual or a PDF. So I created with a spin-off. Most of you guys, you've been around for a while, know the mini manual for the urban guerrilla.
Yeah.
I used that term, threw all the tweets into really rapidly and just threw it out there. And then it got picked up by the Ukrainian government, put out through their websites, pictures of it being all over Ukraine, translated into Ukrainian. I've evolved it to trying to help more and more while I see things happening. And it's also been translated into Japanese, Mandarin,
Taiwan. They're all getting ready, and China's like, no, don't publish that.
Look out, Donbass.
Yeah. That leads me to today, really.
Well, John, I listened to your podcast where you talked about the Battle of Kyiv. That looked like it was looming, and I also saw you on CNN the other day, or I forget which news channel it was on, maybe multiple ones, and you were talking about this diplomatic speak, which was covering for a military retreat. What do you assess is going on with the Russian army around Kyiv, and what are their movements saying about what the reality of the ground is?
Yeah, I'm actually a really big fan of Admiral Kirby as the Pentagon spokesman and the words that he chooses and everything. You don't believe anything a Russian says, believe what a Russian does. They're really on plan D of Kyiv, where they're being committed to attempt to take the city. The whole fake news about that was never their goal. It was a feint, all this. I mean, it's just straight lies and doesn't make common sense to anybody who's ever been in the military for a day. It was clear what they were doing, and every operation was in support of that.
Yeah.
Now they're going to pull them back because they're almost useless where they are. They're holding ground right now, so not very much is really left. as in moved. I do think they will move them. You've seen my most recent stuff, CNN 2 days ago, with my close friend Liam Collins, which was a freak of accident that CNN had us both come on at the same time.
You guys were really simpatico on that one. So.
Yeah. They can't take them out and rapidly redeploy them to the Donbass. We all know that. That's a pretty much fact. You got to rearm, refit, reconstitute.
Oh, sorry. You have to do radiation treatment too. So
yeah,
exactly. Yeah, radiation treatment.
I'm sorry to laugh at that because I feel bad for those soldiers. But man, what do you expect when you go to Chernobyl?
Right. And they were doing training. Actually, the Ukrainians were training there, right before the invasion. I'm like, is that right?
But to be fair, they weren't training quite there, and they were only training on sort of on the road, and in a safe-ish area. So it's a bit different from what the Russians are doing at the moment.
Yeah, don't dig in a radiation zone. That's because do you think there's stuff under there that's contaminable? So.
Yeah. No, I saw a video today of a guy who just drove through with a detector and just driving through where not getting off the road, and the thing was going off.
Yeah. Well, John, let's talk about that's a really interesting point, and what you said on CNN really struck me was if they actually pull out forces and redeploy them, A, it's going to take a long time.
Yeah.
B, what do you think Ukraine's going to do? They're going to do the same thing. And whose forces do you think are going to get to the Donbass first, Ukraine's or the Russians, and what shape will they be in?
Yeah, I mean, the Ukrainians already have 1/3. It's like 10 brigades. I mean, it's not a small force in the Donbass. It's not a small army. Yeah, it's not a weak force. I mean, I'm really hesitant to say that if the Russians do pull back, then somebody could reposition it and send more Ukrainians. You could definitely focus energy, but we're in I think for weeks now, I wouldn't loosen protecting of Kyiv or Odessa or any of the vital things that they need to hold. Now, I would love to see some support going to Mariupol to help. Weeks from now, when Russia reconstitutes or sends in replacements to the units already in the Donbass, there's my fear is the encirclement of those, not of a city, but the encirclement of those that very large Ukrainian forces there. But it would just be another war on the eastern sector with high casualties for the Russians, because anybody who's attacking is at the disadvantage.
Well, John, that brings us to, I think, the most important topic that I'd like to hear from you is the Mariupol fight and what is going on in Mariupol. And you actually had a much more contrarian view than a lot of the pundits out there, where you said the defense there is getting stronger because of Russia's destruction of the city. Talk about what your assessment of the fight for Mariupol is right now, and what, it's impossible to predict, but what are some possibilities to look for in the next week or so?
Yeah, so one of the biggest aspects of the paradox of high intensity combat in urban terrain is the more you destroy it, the harder it is to fight in it. It was that way in Stalingrad when the Luftwaffe destroyed 80% of the city before the close fight even began, because blown out. There's some really good documentaries even showing in Stalingrad when the bombs would blow inside buildings, any following bomb was much less effective because of the concussion, the way the concussion runs out. Now there's basically escape for it, so there's just less impact to the continued bombing. But rubble in itself is very. I think it was General Townsend came back from Mosul who said, basically in the last bit of the Battle of Mosul, it was near impossible to get the fighters that were inside the rubble. He literally had to take a bulldozer and bulldoze over them, because once you collapse a building and you create rubble, it creates natural bomb-proof bunkers that are stronger than real bomb-proof bunkers in some aspects. I think that's the level of fighting that we're going to see in Mariupol. If the defenders, I mean, you can't discount the fact that they've been sieged for about 4 weeks. So the level of water, although Mother Nature could help out with that with a little rain, some snow. But the Russians that do have an overwhelming number. So it's hard to guesstimate 10 to 12,000 Russian, mostly like Chechens and other people, but organized units, and about 3,000, depending on which unit you're talking about, inside of Mariupol. Those numbers aren't that supportive of achieving a quick victory, that's for sure. And they will pay a very high price, and I think you might have heard me say that, if they continue to push forward and go house to house, and their tactics are very poor from what I'm seeing. Even they're more tough units, whether it's Chechens or organized armor brigade or you name it.
So wait, you say that the Chechen TikTok videos, as cool as those look, that's not good tactics? Come on, tell me more.
or the tank by itself, with the awesome Ukrainian tactics of firing an in-law on top of it. Everybody argued in the video about the arming range of the in-law and whether it was effective, and we actually don't know if it killed that tank. But that a tank by itself is a dead tank.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and actually, if an in-law hits the top of the tank, the people inside the tank are going to be deaf for a little while anyway.
It's not a pleasant experience, I'm sure.
Not a pleasant experience, that's for sure.
No.
Yeah, John, for me, I have two absolutely personal questions.
Sure.
Regarding me. First of all, as first one, which weather is better for the defensive? Warm, cold, rain, shiny sky?
Yeah. Cold, well, so that's tough. There's advantage and disadvantage for both sides. Rain, it depends on how good the other force is, right? In the defense, rain conceals the attacker's movement, right? Ranger school, if it's raining.
I'm personally talking about Kyiv.
In Kyiv, rain is the defenders what they need right now.
Okay.
Because it's hypothermic levels, right? So people are actually surprised at how warm it can be out, and people get hypothermia. Wet soldiers that are not that good at their tactics and not that well equipped. Yeah. That's hypothermia weather, to be honest. So rain is the Kyiv and the Mariupol's friend.
So rain is the friend of the defenders. Okay. And what about temperature? It's starting to warm up, but it's been an unseasonably cold spring. And actually, Glenn called this a few weeks ago on our show about frostbite. And Glenn, I'm sure the Russian army wasn't happy about your projections there. But how do you see the weather right now playing out over the next week or so?
Yeah,
Oh,
go
Sorry,
ahead.
Dave, go.
Go ahead.
I mean, you're getting this contrast time now, where it gets warm during the day and then it can still drop below freezing at night. So it's quite a challenging time for people, because especially if you start running around during the day and you get hot because you're running around because you got all your kit on, and then it freezes, and then your back freezes and everything else. It's not funny at all. And if you are one of those that's got frostbite, then you're not a happy boy at the best of times anyway.
So, John, as the weather changes in the next week, that's an interesting question. How do you, it seems like the Ukrainian forces, the Marines and the Azov battalion and the regular army that's in there, are they still fighting in an organized way? I mean, it seems like they're quite stubborn. What are you seeing on the reports out of Mariupol that you can glean from their fighting effectiveness?
Yeah, I mean, I've not much actually, and I listen in on this group daily called the Walter Report, which includes people within the different cities in Ukraine. It's a real big asset to me. I haven't gotten much lately updates, so things that fighting will is everything, right? So they can. It doesn't matter if they got a knife; they can make Russians pay for keep pushing into Mariupol. I mean, I'd love to know what the the reports, like the ACE report. You're like, what's the ammo? What's the casualty? What's the water situation? To know the strength of the different units, and they all have the will to fight, and that's their biggest weapon, right? The fighting, and they've sending messages out. I really the news that buses are being sent to get some of the 160,000 estimated civilians out is a really big moment. If the Russians don't target it like they have other humanitarian events, right? That will help them, actually, to help them fight. It's
more supplies for them. Yeah, more supplies for them.
More food and water that they're going to give to the civilians instead of themselves. A motivated soldier can fight in extreme conditions. I don't think that even the Chechens or even the Russian special forces have that type of will to endure the extremes. So that's heartening. But the paradox of getting all the civilians out is backing up the forces that are inside. I don't know if you've seen the maps of Mariupol, but there's a unit that like pushed all the way to the theater inside, which is just baiting somebody to cut them off and surround them. Once you remove all the civilians, then you can back up when you receive a lot of casualties, which is exactly what happened in Chechnya, and then bring in bombing. I know Mariupol has been bombed really bad, but bring in extreme bombing if there's no civilians, and they can say everything that's left is enemy.
But on the other hand, and this is a question, doesn't it also give more maneuverability to our troops?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a paradox.
Yeah, and my second personal question regarding my safety personally is, what would it take for them to take Kyiv? Like, I understand that it must be an overwhelming force, and they have to overcome our anti-aircraft defenses, anti-missile defenses, and all the, I don't know how much troops and spots we have around Kyiv. And even if I knew, I hopefully wouldn't say it out loud. But what would it take? I mean, just from your experience, because look, I've studied military tactics. I've trained with some of the best guys in Ukraine. I've been training in shooting and maneuverability and combat tactics for the last 12 years, not because something might happen, but because it's just something that brings me joy. So I understand some of it, but of course I've never served, and I don't have the full picture. So what, in your opinion, what would it take for them to take Kyiv?
Yeah, based on my research, they would need to achieve air superiority, step one, and then they would need over 100,000, 120,000 troops and special kinds of troops. They would need a lot of armor, a lot of engineering assets, so bridging and bulldozers, and then they would need a lot of infantry. I don't think in the battle, I don't think the Battle of Kyiv is going to happen. If it would have happened, they would need over 100,000, and they would need a very large, almost siege-busting force made up of a lot of armor, engineers, and infantry to push into the center. They didn't need to clear Kyiv. They didn't need to go house to house. They just needed to get to the government building.
Yeah.
But the city.
But they're not going to, John. They're not going to do it because the quality of the quality of the Russian side is just simply not good enough to actually to do this. I mean, they might level Kiev, the center of Kiev, to the ground, but at some stage, Kiev's a huge place, huge. They're going to run out of missiles and ammunition, long before they actually flatten the whole of Kyiv. And if they
Yeah.
come into fight,
And
they're,
given
they're
that,
just not good enough. It's good, not good
Agreed.
enough.
Agree.
and given
It's
that,
11-year-old school children fighting against people who are coming towards PhD quality.
yeah, but given that, my main fear in this situation is that they're just going to nuke us.
Well, that's a whole nother discussion on the political side. But I think
That's
Platon,
Sunday.
No, I mean that's my fear. I'm not discussing it.
Yeah. No, I don't want to cut that off as not a legitimate fear, but actually militarily, nuking Kiev, I think, is a political non-starter for Russia because
we don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know, and the probabilities and other stuff is a political discussion. But given that this episode is concerning the tactics and everything, I'm saying that given some kind of military stalemate, and given that I'm in Kiev and I will not leave,
it's a legitimate concern.
that is my main concern at the moment.
Yeah, it's bombs and missiles for Kiev. If they try and get in there, they're going to get beaten again, because the quality of the boys is not high, and the second thing is that if they come back again and it's the same people, then they know what they faced last time. They're going to be deeply unhappy about fighting. If they're reinforced, they're going to be reinforced with people that are even less quality than the ones that they've been using. So then you make a reinforced unit of low quality plus lack of morale, and it's not exactly what you could call a fighting force.
Well, actually, Platon, this is really, I think, the point John was making, and he's made, is the battle for Kiev never happened. It basically was won. It was won on the suburbs.
Yeah.
In very tough urban fighting in Irpin, and is now being won in Bucha and Ostomel.
No,
really, that was the Battle of Kiev.
Concerning a conventional war, I would agree.
Sure.
And I'm not saying, and I'm not getting into the political discussion. I'm just saying that given the stalemate that they have in Kiev, and given that they obviously want to achieve something in Kiev, my main fear is just that they're going to jump to that.
Well, I would.
That would be the end of the Russian Federation as it exists in time. If they deploy a tactical nuclear weapon, it will be the end of Russia as a country.
Yeah. I think John, you've mentioned that, and it's really, if someone in the Russian, first of all, Putin has to order it. Secondly, a bunch of people, his chief of staff, his defense minister, need to let him actually transmit the order, and then people, Air Force pilots, need to, with their own conscience, drop a nuke on Kiev. And Kiev is the heart of Russian civilization, right? That's a very emotional city for
Kiev
Russia.
Is the Russian civilization? It
is. It is.
I'm not talking about Russian as in
yes, Ukrainian, Kiev,
Russian,
Rus, for sure.
But I'm talking in terms of Rus, as in Russian generally, because without Kiev, there is no Russia, there is no Russian people, there is basically no Russia.
There's no Russia, there's no Ukraine, there's no
there is no, this whole Slavic region just doesn't exist without Kiev, because there have been 3 eternal cities. Rome, Constantinople, and Kiev.
Yeah,
that's it.
Well, Moscow they think is the 4th, but I would disagree.
Yeah, but I mean, Moscow doesn't exist without Kiev.
Exactly. Well, John, that was actually a really interesting theoretical or hypothetical. I don't think Russia can muster 100,000 troops that could do that today, and the Ukrainian forces probably could turn that amount of soldiers back. But if you were to rewind and you were to be an advisor to Vladimir Putin on the first day of the war or before the war, I know you could morally
say don't go in.
Well, if he insisted, John, and he held you at gunpoint and he said, "You're the best urban warfare specialist in the world, tell me what to do." So you're saying 100,000 troops, which would have been over half of his invading force, would have been needed. And Was that ever feasible with the amount of troops he allocated? He just misallocated, tried to do too much, or what do you think?
Yeah, no, I think so. I mean, he had subordinate objectives. If I would have been advising, there would have been only two fronts. There would have been the Belarus through Chernobyl straight down, and then the Sumy Kharkiv fight. I wouldn't have. I would have left what I had in the east to hold. I wouldn't have tried to come up through the south or push any farther east. I would have massed power in that decisive operation, which is the convoy was the main effort. But then he tried basically like 7 fronts. It was just dumb. And I would have also used more air power. To be frank, I would have bombed a lot more than he did in the opening days to take out anything and everything around Kyiv. That was it. I would have, like I said, I would have marshaled more forces at those 2 points, left forces just to hold ground in the east, and then punched as hard and fast as I could in this. Even at this point, Sam, the U.S. military could not take Kyiv.
Whoa. Okay. That's a quotable we're going to put out on Twitter, and you're going to retweet that one, John. Say that again and tell me why.
Sun Tzu said the worst of all strategies is to attack a besieged city. That holds true to this day, and we have not done it in our history
ever. Yeah.
You know, we will rapidly get to urban terrain and we've had multiple meeting engagements. We've had rapid response to like the Battle of Way, where the enemy got in there and did a hasty defense. This is a multi-week long defense, more like the Battle of Mosul, which wasn't us. It was, to be frank, Iraqi security forces who expended their best units early on, and then it was basically a combination of militias backed by U.S. air power against an enemy who had 2 years, but an enemy that was a rookie terrorist organization that had no clue on military training. Kyiv is protected by a highly trained Ukrainian military supported by tens of thousands of civilians, where every street would be what we call non-permissive terrain. Could you do it with months with the U.S. military? One, we're a rule-abiding force. We will protect civilians even in our most lethal state.
Yeah,
that's why urban warfare is so hard, is because we can knock out, we can take out somebody on one floor in one room. That's the type of precision we have, but we're still going to respect human rights and not. So in order to take Kyiv at this point, it would cost even us a lot. And so then you get to the whole clause with what's the value of the objective to the warring sides. In a defended, besieged city, it means everything to the citizens in Kyiv.